Hello, and welcome to the ComSpark Magazine interview series. I am Taylor Gorning with AHEAD, and we are partnering with ComSpark Magazine in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Josette Reep, Director of Development Initiatives, Software Development, and Systems Administration within the areas of education, patient care, and R&D at the University of Cincinnati. Josette, good morning. It's good to be with you today.
Good morning. It's good to be with you as well.
All right, so let's get started. Josette, there are two major areas that I'm looking forward to covering and gathering insight from you today. The first is how COVID has impacted the university and particularly how you have leveraged data to respond and adapt to the ever-changing landscape of the students' learning experience and safety. And then second, discussing an example of how leveraging AI can improve student outcomes. So those are the two main discussion topics based on our previous conversations, and looking forward to getting into it. So let's get started. What has the university done to respond to the changing learning environment with COVID, and how have you leveraged data to react accordingly?
So like many other institutions, we've had to kind of learn on the fly. Pandemics kind of put you in a position where you really need to react to the unknown. So one of the things that we did early on was to really look at ways that we could leverage existing data at the institution to create a robust contact tracing system at the University of Cincinnati. And that involved not just finding a tool that says it can do contact tracing, but really working to integrate existing system data, from our student information system, from our ERP, which is SAP at the University of Cincinnati, and a host of other environments in order to pull together the resources required to really have a robust contact tracing system, and also a robust mechanism of communicating information to students, faculty, and staff, and visitors, as well as a robust mechanism for receiving information. So at UC, we rolled out not only a back-end system that integrated all of these different services together, but we also rolled out a mobile app to help collect and gather information from the university community.
Obviously, over the last year, it's sometimes tough to do this, but this is something we had talked about as well. If you were to rewind a year, 12 months ago, what's something that you potentially could have done differently, if anything?
Well, I think that, when you think about contact tracing and just, the concept of really tracking, individuals' data, there's always challenges, right? Individuals are concerned about the big brother syndrome, right? And so when you're dealing with data, it's important to make sure that, we have ways and that we can assure the community that we are anonymizing the information, that we're doing what we need to do in order to keep the community safe.
Awesome. So what's a silver lining? You had mentioned, engaging. This has opened up opportunities for engaging students. And could you care to share on just a silver lining that's been produced throughout this pandemic?
Well, I think silver lining is that we've worked on, a couple of things. One, the university campus has remained relatively safe. Our positivity rate is exceptionally low, much lower than, the city that we live in and even the county that we live in. And we've maintained that. And I think that's due a lot to obviously the great community working together on this. But at the end of the day, it's that data and making sure that we're using that information properly in order to make, good decisions. I think the other silver lining is just the fact that we have learned how to communicate with students in a different way. Research shows that students do not read email, and that's certainly been our experience. And so when you are sending, students an email that says, hey, we need you to do X, Y, or Z, 9 times out of 10, they may not read that email, right? Or find a way to unsubscribe or, put that into a folder that doesn't get read. And so kind of a fallback to the way that we're used to communicating, or at least I am, right? But this is the age of instant messaging. I mean, it's been here for decades, but text messaging, social media, all of those things are more along the lines of what students interface with on a regular basis. And so one of the things that we've incorporated into the work that we've done is to, integrate, text messaging and some of those other methods of communication so that we can, encourage, more timely and effective means of really translating information between the students and the various groups. And so we see that as something that's a silver lining because, past COVID, that is absolutely, the way that we need to move forward, right? Email is kind of, necessary in many ways, but it does not replace the other methods of communication.
Yeah. Speaking of communication, phone rings. I would imagine voicemail probably wasn't at the top of your list in terms of engaging with students either. It was all the newer forms of not so much new, but no, appreciate that answer. So you already kind of alluded to the investment that you and the university have made in terms of adapting throughout COVID, and there's that balance between the investments you have to make to respond, and then the innovation that you're trying to make as a university, kind of like as far as what was being planned before COVID, but. When you take a look at, and we'll get into another use case here in a second, but when you take a look at like the three main pillars, if you will, of any transformation, people, process, and technology, of those three, while you were working on all this, which one comes to mind in terms of like the heaviest lift, the biggest hurdle, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I would say the technology is always the easiest. Technology is there, one of the things that, you learn in digital transformation is that you need to be able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment. Business agility is huge. And certainly being agile and having agile processes is key to that. And so over the course of this past year, we've had to really adapt and adjust, really effectively. And so maintaining, weekly sprint cycles where we're making adjustments as we need to and treating this is a very, important and key, agile project was critical to making it successful.
Awesome. So let's move on to another use case apart from COVID and move our discussion to highlighting another example of how you're achieving student outcomes leveraging data and AI. So can you share with us that example?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at is how we can leverage all of this awesome data that we have in order to create better outcomes. And in particular, the area that we're most interested in at the moment in the IT area is STEM. So STEM, if you look at the data for the past decade, the need, for expertise in, science and technology certainly hasn't decreased. It's increased exponentially, with, the changing landscape, IoT, and a whole host of other things. On the flip side of that, if you look at the statistics in terms of what's happening in education, in terms of producing, graduates in STEM, it's going in the opposite direction. And so, one of the things that we're very interested in is determining how we can, affect a positive change in that, right? So, and in particular, when you look at the decline, there is a greater decline in the African American community, as an example. So people who are in underrepresented groups. And so one of the questions is how, why is that happening? What can we do to affect change so that we can increase, more students who are successfully graduating out of STEM programs. And so, there's a lot of longitudinal study data that's out there where people have looked at it in different ways, but it hasn't really been, looked at holistically leveraging tools like AI now that we have it, right? And so if we were to take all of that data and go through a supervised learning process where we, train the data using all of this historical information, what can we learn from it? What are the factors that produce positive outcomes for students, right? We tend to focus on, what the negative barriers are, but for those who were able to succeed, the other question is what were the things that helped, towards that success? And then can we do things to impact, that change in a positive way through policies, practices at the institution, but also can we take it and, create dynamic tools that allow us to make adjustments or to make recommendations to students in real time so that we're not waiting 10 years down the road to say, oh, looking 10 years back, if we had known X, Y, or Z, you would have been successful. What can we do today? And so that I think that's the power that, AI really brings to the table.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely appealing to the strengths finders communities out there that definitely focus on, the strengths and positive outcomes and what actually, provides that versus just what isn't working. So that's enlightening, and appreciate the insight there. You had mentioned something when we spoke, Josette, and that's how important the protection from biases are as a key factor in this journey. So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about a bit when we're thinking about inclusion, in particular, is just the impact that bias has. And so we think about it, just in your daily work environment. If you're working in an environment where you feel welcome and safe, that's a great thing. But if you're experiencing bias, whether it's overt or not, that tends to have a negative factor and can impact many things in terms of retention, for example, recruitment into an organization. And it's the same in higher education, right? If you're a student who's trying to go through this process and your faculty interactions, for example, are filled, unfortunately, with some experiences of bias where perhaps, you were involved with an instructor who didn't necessarily, believe in you, or if an instructor, for example, says something about women and the belief that women aren't quite made for X, Y, or Z, which, unfortunately has happened, right? So what can you do about that? And then also, how does that impact a student's confidence as they're trying to go through the program? So bias is one of the things that's not measured directly. And so a part of the work that in the research that I'm doing right now is to really identify those factors that can help us measure that bias, and then make sure that we add that into the training model that, we're developing for AI in order to increase, positive outcomes.
Great. Well, I appreciate we're about at time, and just really appreciate the insight, Josette. And I just want to personally thank you for the leadership that you don't just display at UC, but just within the community from an inclusion standpoint, and your perspective there and breaking down barriers and everything. So it's awesome. We appreciate it, and just thank you for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
All right. If you have any questions or would like to see more information and more interviews, please visit comspark.tech. Thank you very much.